Putin said. He didn't say the Russian Federation. He said the Union State, which means that Belarus is now permanently linked to Russia from a geopolitical strategic standpoint. There is no difference between the Russian Federation and Belarus when it comes to the defense. And it was just a few years ago that, Poland and the Baltic states, backed by the United States and the European Union, were trying to color revolution in Belarus. Lukashenko was climbing out of helicopters with an AK, 74 in his hand, saying, "If you want me, come and get me." And Europe thought that Belarus was ripe for the picking. That ain't the case anymore. Belarus is firmly in the camp of the Union State, which means Belarus and Russia are joined at the hip politically, economically, and militarily. So that's one of the big things here, because, Belarus provides critical military advantages for Russia in any potential conflict with NATO. And this exercise proved that 100%. One of the things that was done in this exercise, not just that Russia fired the Zircon missile, but that Belarus exercised its Oreshnik capabilities. The Oreshnik, of course, being the intermediate range missile that Russia fired on November 21st of last year, for the first time in history, an intermediate range missile fired in anger. And it's now entered serial production, and Russia is in the process of deploying Oreshnik units in the Russian Federation and in Belarus. Belarus is getting a regiment. That's 3 battalions. Each battalion has 3 launchers. And so Europe was put on notice that there is no difference between Russia and Belarus. And that's got to make, NATO planners understand that a conflict in the future with Russia, Belarus is automatically part of Russia. The Belarusian military now is joined at the hip. You don't have, it's not about waiting for Russia to send forces into Belarus to attack the Sawiki corridor, etc. They're there. There's a group of forces. They're fully integrated with the Belarusians, and it's just a game changer. But the other thing that Putin's talked about is the priority on sovereignty. The Russians aren't here. This is a defensive operation. This is about Russia doing what's necessary to defend its sovereignty. So a clear signal was sent that this isn't the exercise, March on the Rhine, that people used to fear back in the Cold War. This isn't about Russia trying to take Warsaw. This isn't about Russia trying to take Berlin. It's about Russia defending the Union State against outside aggression, NATO aggression. It's the clearest signal possible that Russia, cannot be beaten, but is not looking for a fight.
I spent 23 years scripting military exercises for JSOC and SOCOM. So these were on a much smaller scale, but the same principles apply. What the purpose of these kinds of exercises is to basically ensure that the communications between different units, and in this case, not just different units, but different countries, is effective, that they can talk to one another, that they can relay orders back and forth, that they can actually take action together. So it involves it's sort of a test run to make sure that in the event that something real world happens, they could actually carry out the missions that they do. I did a brief stint while at CIA in covert action, which was information operation. Now this is back in the Stone Age. Okay, we didn't have social media. We had to actually do, if you're going to put out a video, you had to go to a camcorder or some official camera with Kodak film to go film it. The written word, it was in newspapers, magazines, but we were able to insert stories and create narratives. And the narratives had a very specific purpose to shape public opinion. Well, now we're seeing that in steroids. So just the other day, we saw Keith Kellogg insisting that, Russia's losing, Ukraine's winning. I mean, it'd be funny if it wasn't involving the deaths of actually tens of thousands of Ukrainians on a monthly basis. But here he is, lying about this. And I don't know if he actually knows the truth or if he actually believes what he's saying. But regardless of whether he believes it or he's deliberately lying, what we know is what he's spreading is just not true. But this desire to shape public opinion and to create a narrative, it spills over beyond the war between, the special military operation with Ukraine. We've seen it with Hamas, where Hamas is labeled this massive terrorist group. Except when I went back and actually pulled the numbers to look at, can you give me the number of attacks, the dates, the victims, how many did they kill? What you discover is, and this is from the Israeli Foreign Ministry's database, is that over a 25-year period, Hamas was involved with Palestinians. It wasn't just Hamas, Palestinians, which includes Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Palestine Islamic Jihad, and others. There's like 16 different groups. Over that 25-year period, 1,527 Israelis were killed. Now, I'm not trying to minimize the loss of 1,527, but that's over a 25-year period. That's not exactly what you would call, killing 3,000 people on 9/11. It's not even in the same ballpark. And yet, the media persists with spreading this lie that Hamas is this, irredeemable terrorist organization. Same with Iran. That we're told Iran, number one sponsor of terrorism, except if you go look at the data, the State Department's annual report on terrorism, now called Country Reports on Terrorism, you don't find any groups that are in the top 10 most active terrorist groups that are actually sponsored by, paid for, trained by Iran. They're all actually have connections to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emiratis, the Gulf Arabs. Again, we're now living in this world where the fantasy becomes reality, and then reality is shoved to the side so that we no longer have a firm grasp on what's actually happening.
This was the Trends Journal magazine back in the the spring of 2014. So how happy that guy is? It's about the United States overthrow of the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych that nobody talks about anymore anywhere. And the article was written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. Just quickly, Washington concluded that Russia needed to be confronted with or distracted by problems that would leave the Russian government less confident or be able to counter Washington's aggression elsewhere. I'm talking about this because of what Scott is saying about Russia defending itself and what the Ukrainians have been doing. He goes on to say, Ukraine presented the perfect opportunity for Washington to advance its hegemonic agenda. In a speech at the National Press Club last December, which was December 13, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland boasted that Washington had invested $5 billion in non-governmental organizations in Ukraine for the purpose to, quote, teach democracy. So the people have no clue of how the United States overthrew the government. And this is the Victoria Nuland, by the way, that when the Ukraine war began, this is March 30th, 2022, from Current Times. Russia taking credible losses in Ukraine, senior U.S. says. I think that unfortunately the Russians have not yet fully learned how tough the Ukrainian military is. U.S. Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland said in an interview with Current Times on March 29th. All right? Oh. Undersecretary, yeah. How about under a piece of crap? This murderous clown lady. Again, she goes on, Nuland said that Moscow's defense to reposition its forces, as announced on March 29th, quote, was a direct result of the fierce resistance that the Ukrainians put up outside of Kyiv and its suburbs. This is the crap that the mainstream media keeps shoving down at people's mouth that they keep swallowing. You ready? Former Russian commander in Ukraine says Putin could be overthrown by the Wagner mercenary army. Business Insider, May 29th, 2023. U.S. says Ukraine has sufficient supplies for counteroffensive. This was June 2023. Quote, this is a war, so we know there will be damage on both sides. This is according to the little clown boy who said the counteroffensive is going great, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. I think the Russians showed us the same 5 vehicles about 1,000 times from 10 different angles, scoffed Austin. Yep. Goes on and on and on, that we will continue to provide Ukraine with what it needs to succeed. That's a quote. Stealing our money to give to these jerks. Again, here, Vladimir Zelensky says Ukraine counteroffensive about to gain pace. All of this stuff is forgotten. How they bragged that this counteroffensive was going to go on. Zelensky, we will be able to do what previous generations failed to do. This is the crap the mainstream media keeps shoving down at people's mouth that everybody forgot about. And it keeps on going. So no, there's no way in the world they're going to win this war. Russia's going to keep what they got. And NATO, I believe, is going to do everything they can to stop it. And you got crazy people in charge. They're out of their mind. You don't ask an out-of-a-mind freak why they're out of their minds. And these little gutless politicians are nothing more than that. They're little gutless freaks who will do anything to stay in office. And you don't believe me? You got the Gatson Macron over there. You got Starmer. You got the one jerk after another. They're going to do everything they can to stay in power.
You know, the Council on Foreign Relations published this. Europe's delayed reckoning with Russia, a plan to beat the Kremlin on its own terms. And I just want to highlight a particular quote on what it suggests. It suggests that Europe be more aggressive and calculating in its approach to Russia, that use all of the tools of economically available, seizure of Russian assets abroad, and it should take stringent positions that can co-sign it to the sidelines of future negotiations, refusing to countenance sanctions relief for Russia unless 1991 borders are restored. It should also learn to beat Putin at his own subversive game and also, if it wants to shape Russia, it must start now, or these drones, as we were talking about earlier, are going to be just a part of what's to come. But you know, Scott, there's also a reality here that I'd like your comment on too, because as Europe is being pushed by, and everyone needs to remember that Council on Foreign Affairs is the Council on Foreign Relations, really a CIA entity. You also have the Trump administration clearing the so-called first Ukraine arms aid paid for by allies. So what's your reaction to these developments, Scott? Because you know, on the one hand, we've seen the U.S. and Russia engage in talks. We've seen the U.S. under Trump talk about this is Europe's war. But at the same time, as the CIA seems like it wants to push Europe into more and more war with Russia, the Trump administration is continuing its role.
Well, first of all, that article is, we have to acknowledge that it's written by a bunch of Russophobes who are living in a fantasy world. You know, had the CIA come to me in 2021 and advised me on what would be the best course of action vis-a-vis Russia, I would have said to continue to ensure that the West is fully engaged inside Russia. You see, at that time, Russia had not a viable opposition, but it had it did have a political opposition. Navalny was the head of it, but you know, there were hundreds of thousands of active political opponents to Vladimir Putin and millions of people who were passive opponents to Vladimir Putin. The West's economic reach had insinuated itself into about 30, close to maybe 40% of Russia's economy, and Russia was afraid to take any action that could cause a rupture with the West because there was a political opposition, and this economic insinuation gave the West leverage over around 20 to 30% of the Russian population who, were on the sidelines. They would support Vladimir Putin so long as their economic well-being was taken care of. You had billions of dollars of capital in the hands under the control of oligarchs who kept that money outside of Russia, and the Russian government was trying to get them to reinvest, but they had to be careful. You see, all the leverage was there. All the leverage was there. So you slow roll it. You come in and you slow roll. You do the slow pain, if that's what you want to do. But instead, they went whole hog. They did the divorce. None of these conditions exist anymore. There is no opposition to Vladimir Putin inside Russia today. They all fled. Remember those hundreds of thousands of Russians that were getting out there to escape mobilization and leave after the war? They all fled to Georgia and Kazakhstan and Europe and the world. They're gone. The people that stayed behind, they're supporting Vladimir Putin come hell or high water. There was this rapid divorce. Russia has reconfigured its economy so that it is sanctions proof. That's why Russia yawns whenever sanctions are mentioned. There is zero sanctions leverage over the Russian economy today. Zero. Because Russia also has the ace in the hole. Right now, Russia has retained an economy that operates on, capitalist principles. They still have a stock market. They still talk about interest rates and all the same things we talk about here in the West. Russia worried about inflation rates and all that. But if need, Russia can play the economic mobilization card. They can go full Joseph Stalin. And they can make that transition to a state-controlled economy that the West can't make. Russia could do it overnight because almost every major Russian enterprise now is a joint stock company where the government has a significant play, and they can just take it over instantly. All those oligarchs with all that money, they're gone. And now the ones that stay in Russia, they have to reinvest all that money back into Russia. They don't get to take their resources and flee. There's no leverage. Russia has written off its foreign reserves, meaning that they understand that the West is nothing but a bank robber, that these hundreds of billions of dollars that Russia had parked as part of the global economic system, they don't expect to get that back. They've already adjusted that. So all these people talk about, we're going to take Russia's currency reserves that we froze. It'll have zero impact on Russia. It'll collapse your economy, because the world will recognize that there is no such thing as a safe haven for sovereign wealth. Because if you can take it from the Russians, you can take it from anybody. And so that's the end of currency reserve status, etc. Nothing those people wrote in that article can happen. Russia's already made the adjustments. This is just a fantasy world to these people. And because now they've realized that the decisions they made in 2021 and 2022 to declare economic war on Russia, to engage in this proxy conflict with NATO, they've lost. And so now they're desperately trying to go back to the only thing they know, which was the world that existed before they made all these bad decisions. But they'll never go back to that world. That world doesn't exist anymore. Russia has redefined its existence, and it doesn't need any of the things that those people think they have as leverage over Russia. So, that's just the reality. These people live in an absolute fantasy world, and there's no relation whatsoever with reality.
First of all, when it comes to Russia, Scott Ritter knows about Russia inside out that 99.99% of the people have no idea about. So he just puts the facts out there. And of course, they taught us to hate Russia when I was a kid, hiding under a desk in case an atom bomb goes off. Like, that's going to save your life. And again, nothing more than propaganda about what he said about Putin not going anywhere. Putin will be gone within a year, and the West must be ready for his terrifying replacement, warns ex-MI sixth spy. All right? This is July 28th, 2023. The lies that they keep selling. Christopher Steele, who ran MI's M16s, Russian, blah, 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 blah. All right? They said he was going to be gone. So it's just propaganda. Ukraine war. Kyiv could gain upper hand in 2023, says U.S. think tank. How about think tank? Institute for Study of War. So what Scott is saying, you're not going to beat the Russians over here. The Trends Journal said that when Biden said, when they put the sanctions on Russia, that, quote, Putin's going to pay the price, and all those companies left Russia, we said, this is stupid. Russia has everything they need to be self-sustaining, technologically, scientifically, culturally, militarily, on and on. They don't need these companies. They're more self-sustaining. And the world, the BRICS, the Chinese, the Indian, we just saw that meeting in China, they've had enough of the United States. This is the beginning of the end. We're going the same place where the Great Britain went, that our country overthrew, to getting them out of there. We became that country where the founding fathers hated. Last year,
Gerald and I helped Gerald put on a this rally last year. And for the people out there thinking, well, it's just another peace rally.
Yeah.
Last year, we announced Operation Dawn, a drive to stop a nuclear war. Danny, you know about this because you helped us out in New York City. We stopped a nuclear war, ladies and gentlemen. This project stopped a nuclear war. What was started last year at Gerald's rally in Kingston is the reason why you're alive today. Because if we didn't do this, if we didn't have this operation, there would have been a better than, the CIA says it straight up, more than a 50% chance that there would have been a nuclear war between Russia and the United States by the end of the year. And Operation Dawn got the Trump administration to commit to a policy that back then was candidate Trump, of not doing what Biden's doing. Donald Trump, we said you have to make a statement to stop the ATACMS missiles from being launched deep into Ukraine because that was Russia's red line. And Trump, after the pressure we put on through Congress, did that. Okay? This stuff works. Okay, we're not talking about coming out here and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Gerald is lining up some of the best damn minds in the business of preventing war, of peace and justice. And what we're talking about here isn't just coming out and spewing nonsense. These are problem solvers that are out there, people who will solve the problems that the world faces today. Danny, I know you would have been there because we invited you, but unfortunately you've got a family commitment. But people like Danny Haifong, people out there who are just hooking and jabbing every single day. Gerald Celente, who puts out Trends Journal. Read the goddamn journal. Sorry, Danny, I'm using bad language, but hey, you invited me. Read it, guys. Subscribe to it. Why? Because Gerald is right almost all the time. He gives you the information you need to understand the direction the world is trending in, hence the concept of Trends Journal. Read it. Learn from it. Act on it, be empowered by it. But even more so, come and support us. Gerald and I both have this vision. I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not, but damn it, Gerald, let's shut Kingston down. Let's fill Kingston up with people who say we're not going to take it anymore. There's a genocide taking place right now in Gaza. America is facilitating it. Israeli snipers just admitted they're shooting children, 50 a day, shooting them in the head for the crime of trying to get water, trying to get food. 50 freaking children a day paid by our taxpayer money. They're blowing up buildings. They're committing ethnic genocide. They're slaughtering them. We're doing this, ladies and gentlemen. Are you mad? Are you going to take it anymore? Or are you going to come out and join us in Kingston? Shut the goddamn city down. Shut the thruway down. Shut the down, shut the country down, because that's what it's going to take. Let's do it. Gerald, I'm behind you 100%, pal.
Thank you. Again, it's not about us. It's about we the people. Yeah. And as Scott is saying, we got to close this thing down and we got to make the news with it. This genocide, I got to write about this stuff every day. I'm so heartbroken to see this. Could you imagine being a Palestinian in Gaza? And what did they call it before this happened? Oh, an open-air concentration camp? Yeah. And look what they're doing to them. Murdering in front of everybody's eyes. Again, here's, by the way, the foundation of Occupy Peace, which I launched over a decade ago. Close all the military bases overseas. Bring home the troops. Secure the homeland. And put the troops to work rebuilding our third world infrastructure. Give them skills. What are they killing? What do they say? There's about 20 suicides a day from former people in the military?
Yeah,
bring their spirit up. And the other thing is, you want to go to war? Let the people vote. Scott was talking about being in Switzerland. Oh, direct democracy. Oh, what, Switzerland hasn't been in a war since what, 1856 or something?
Yeah.
Let the people vote. I got these little clown boys, little Mike Johnson, little guy, little jerk, little Lindsey Graham couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag if they made one big enough. They're telling us what to do. So that's what Occupy Peace is. And we need to unite for this, because if we don't unite, it's going to be hell on earth. We got crazy maniacs in a country near you, and they could care less about us. They only care about themselves.